Picture this, the most prestigious educational institution in the known galaxy, where the brightest minds from 17 different species come to learn about the universe's most fascinating and terrifying creatures. Galactic University's Xenobiology Department, Building 7, Classroom 42 Alpha. Sounds impressive, right? Well, it would be if half the students weren't currently hyperventilating into paper bags. Meet Jake Murphy, age 22, Earth Standard Time, sitting in the back row with his feet propped up on the desk like he's watching Netflix instead of attending the galaxy's most elite xenobiology program. While his classmates, a collection of tentacles, scales, and what can only be described as sentient jello, clutch their various appendages in terror, Jake's scrolling through memes on his phone, because apparently, even in the far future, college students gun college students. "Today, class," announces Professor Vrex, adjusting his ridiculous tiny spectacles that somehow stay perched on his reptilian snout, "we will be conducting a live specimen demonstration." The way he says it, you'd think he just announced the apocalypse, which, considering his track record with lesson plans, isn't entirely out of the question. Professor Vrex stands about 7 feet tall, covered in emerald scales that shimmer under the classroom's artificial lighting. He's got the kind of ego that requires its own gravitational field and a voice that suggests he practices his lectures in front of a mirror. For the past 3 months, he's made it abundantly clear that he considers humans to be adorable little barbaric pets who somehow stumbled into space travel through sheer dumb luck. As we discussed in previous lectures, Vrex continues, pacing dramatically in front of his terrified audience, the study of apex predators requires both theoretical knowledge and practical observation. Today's subject represents the pinnacle of evolutionary perfection in the art of systematic annihilation. The alien students exchange horrified glances. Crix, an insectoid from the hive worlds whose compound eyes are currently reflecting every possible shade of panic, starts making that chittering sound that passes for hyperventilation among his species. Next to him, Blomp, a gelatinous being whose transparency makes his internal organs visible and currently doing what can only be described as the mambo, quivers like he's being electrocuted. Now, I realize some of you may find today's demonstration challenging, Professor Vrex says with the kind of condescending smile usually reserved for explaining finger painting to toddlers. However, exposure to genuine threat scenarios is essential for any serious xenobiologist. Those who feel unprepared are welcome to observe from the safety corridor. Half the class immediately bolts for the exits. Jake doesn't even look up from his phone. "Mr. Murphy?" Professor Vrex's voice drips with the special kind of disdain academics reserve for students who refuse to be properly terrified. "Perhaps you'd care to join your more sensible classmates in the observation area?" Jake finally glances up, blinks once, and shrugs. "Nah, I'm good here." The remaining students stare at him like he just volunteered to French kiss a black hole. Professor Vrex clears his throat with the theatrical flair of someone who's been waiting his entire career for this moment. "Very well then, let us proceed with today's subject." He gestures toward a massive containment unit at the front of the classroom, roughly the size of a shipping container and humming with enough energy to power a small moon. "Behold," he announces, practically vibrating with academic excitement, "the shadow maw of Kepler 442b, the apex predator that single-handedly drove 3 separate civilizations to extinction. A creature so perfectly evolved for killing that even our most advanced military forces classify it as a Class 7 extinction event." The containment unit begins to hiss and steam like the galaxy's most ominous cappuccino machine. Crix makes a sound like a broken garbage disposal. "Professor, surely we could study this creature via holographic projection? Or perhaps a detailed 3-dimensional model? Maybe a really nice painting?" "Nonsense," Vrex waves dismissively. "Nothing substitutes for direct observation. The shadow maw represents the ultimate expression of predatory evolution. Standing 12 feet at the shoulder, weighing approximately 2 metric tons, with claws capable of shearing through battle-grade titanium alloy. Its hide can deflect plasma rifle fire, and its sensory capabilities allow it to track prey across entire star systems." Blomp is now vibrating at a frequency that's making the windows rattle. "What about the teeth, Professor? Please tell me you're not going to mention the teeth." "Ah, yes, the teeth!" Vrex's eyes light up, like he's discussing his favorite hobby. 7 rows of self-sharpening biosteel incisors, each one containing a neurotoxin that induces paralysis within seconds. The shadow maw doesn't just kill its prey, it ensures they remain conscious throughout the entire consumption process. 3 more students flee the classroom. Jake yawns and switches to a different app on his phone. The creature's hunting methodology, Vrex continues, clearly enjoying himself, involves stalking its prey for days, learning their routines, their fears, their weaknesses. It's been observed dismantling starship hulls with surgical precision to reach the crew inside. The last recorded encounter resulted in an entire research station being converted into what can only be described as an artistic arrangement of screaming. The emergency lights begin flashing red. Automated warning systems kick in, announcing in 17 different languages that a catastrophic biological hazard is about to be released. Blast shields start sliding down over the windows. The air filtration system shifts into what sounds like panic mode. And through it all, the containment unit continues its ominous mechanical countdown. Now, observe carefully, Professor Vrex says, backing away toward what Jake assumes is a conveniently placed escape hatch. The Shadow Maw's hunting behavior in an enclosed environment. The containment unit's massive door slides open with a sound like the universe's largest zipper. What emerges makes every remaining alien student question their life choices. The Shadow Maw flows out of the container like liquid nightmare fuel. 12 feet of pure, predatory perfection, covered in what looks like living shadow that seems to absorb light itself. Its eyes burn with an intelligence that suggests it's already planned 17 different ways to turn this classroom into a buffet. When it moves, it doesn't make a sound. It simply exists in one place, and then suddenly exists in another, like reality is having trouble keeping up with its presence. Crix faints. Blomp attempts to hide behind a desk roughly 1/10 his size. The Shadow Maw's head swivels slowly, surveying the classroom with the methodical precision of a professional assassin choosing appetizers. And Jake looks up from his phone, glances at the creature and says, "Ha, big dog." Professor Vrex, who has now somehow materialized behind a blast-proof podium that definitely wasn't there 5 minutes ago, decides this is the perfect moment for an impromptu lecture on human psychology. Because nothing says appropriate timing like academic discourse while a living apocalypse prowls your classroom. "Live class," he announces, his voice slightly muffled by what appears to be a full-face protective helmet. Observe the human's remarkable lack of self-preservation instincts. This is a textbook example of what xenopsychologists call death world conditioning syndrome. The Shadow Maw pauses its casual survey of potential victims to tilt its massive head at Jake, as if trying to figure out why this particular piece of prey isn't running around screaming like a proper snack should. "You see," Vrex continues, apparently deciding that now is the time for educational commentary, "humans evolved on what can only be described as a planetary murder simulator. Earth, as we've studied, is home to creatures that would be classified as biological weapons on any civilized world." Crix, who has regained consciousness and is currently attempting to camouflage himself as a chair, whispers, "What kind of creatures? Oh, where do I begin?" Vrex's academic enthusiasm temporarily overrides his survival instincts. Sharks that can smell blood from miles away, spiders whose bite liquefies internal organs, snakes that can unhinge their jaws to swallow prey twice their size, bears that can run 30 miles per hour and bench press a small aircraft. Blomp makes a sound like a deflating balloon. Those sound like mythical monsters. "And that's just the land animals," Vrex continues, warming to his topic while the Shadow Maw continues its leisurely approach toward Jake. "Their oceans contain creatures with tentacles longer than starship hulls, box jellyfish whose touch means instant death, octopi that can solve puzzles and hold grudges, and don't get me started on their insects." "Please don't get started on their insects," Crix begs. "Bullet ants whose sting feels like being shot, wasps that turn other creatures into zombie slaves, mosquitoes that spread diseases capable of toppling civilizations. And somehow, humans looked at all of this planetary hostility and thought, you know what? Let's domesticate some of these things and keep them as pets." The classroom falls silent except for the soft sound of alien students quietly sobbing. Jake finally looks up again as the Shadow Maw draws closer, its massive form now less than 10 feet away. "Oh, come on," he says to the room in general. "It's not that bad. Earth's got plenty of nice animals, too." "Nice animals?" Vrex's voice cracks. "Your nice animals include wolves that hunt in coordinated packs, cats that toy with their prey for entertainment, and something called a honey badger that our military strategists have classified as a potential weapon of mass destruction." "Honey badgers are pretty cool," Jake admits. The shadow maw is now close enough that Jake can see his reflection in its multifaceted nightmare eyes. The creature's breathing sounds like an industrial air compressor having an asthma attack. Blomp whispers, "How is he not dead yet?" "Humans," Vrex explains in hushed, reverent tones, "don't just survive death worlds. They thrive on them. They seek out danger for recreation. They voluntarily jump out of perfectly functional aircraft. They climb mountains that can kill them just to see what's on top. They swim with sharks for fun." "That's insane," Crix chittered. "That's Tuesday," Jake corrects absently, finally giving the shadow maw his full attention as it looms over him like a living eclipse. Now here's where things get interesting. Jake stands up slowly, and I mean slowly, like he's getting out of bed on a Sunday morning instead of facing down the galaxy's most efficient killing machine. The shadow maw freezes, probably because in its entire evolutionary history, prey has never voluntarily made itself taller and more visible. Jake tilts his head slightly, studying the creature with the kind of casual interest you'd normally reserve for a mildly amusing YouTube video. "Yeah, okay," he says, nodding like he's just confirmed something he suspected all along. "You're just a big scared puppy, aren't you?" The collective gasp from the remaining alien students could probably power a small space station. "Puppy!" Professor Vrex's voice reaches frequencies that shouldn't be possible for reptilian vocal cords. "That creature has systematically dismantled entire military flotillas." "Sure," Jake agrees, taking a step toward the shadow maw, whose massive head tilts in confusion. "But look at the body language. See how he's holding his shoulders? That's not predator posture, that's anxiety posture." The shadow maw, who up until this moment has been the undisputed nightmare champion of known space, takes a step backward. Jake continues his approach, hands loose at his sides, moving with the kind of relaxed confidence that comes from growing up in a world where everything wants to kill you and you've made peace with that fact. His ears are pinned back, well, what passes for ears. Tail's not up in dominance position, and look at those eyes. Everyone looks at the eyes. The terrible, burning, soul-destroying eyes that have been the last thing countless victims ever saw. "Those aren't killer eyes," Jake explains patiently. "Those are, I don't know what's happening and it's scary eyes. This guy's been ripped away from everything familiar and shoved into a weird box with strange smells and bright lights. He's not hunting, he's stressed." The shadow maw makes a sound that's somewhere between a growl and a whimper, like a garbage disposal trying to sing a lullaby. Jake stops about 3 feet away from certain death and does something that will be talked about in xenobiology textbooks for the next 1,000 years. He turns his back on the apex predator and looks around the classroom for something specific. "Perfect," he says, spotting a broken chair leg that some previous student probably left behind during a hasty evacuation. He picks it up, hefts it experimentally, and then, in a move that causes Professor Vrex to start praying to deities he doesn't even believe in, Jake turns back to the shadow maw. "Hey, big guy," he says in the kind of cheerful, slightly higher-pitched voice that every dog owner in the galaxy would immediately recognize. "You want to play?" The shadow maw blinks, all 6 of its eyes, simultaneously. Jake draws his arm back and tosses the chair leg across the classroom, not at the creature, not as a weapon, but in a perfect arc that sends it clattering against the far wall. "Go get it." What happens next will require several alien psychiatrists to work overtime. The shadow maw, the apex predator, the civilization destroyer, the living embodiment of evolutionary perfection in the art of murder, bounce after the stick like a golden retriever who just heard the word walkies. Buns. Like actual bouncing. 12 feet and 2 metric tons of pure nightmare fuel, bouncing across the classroom with what can only be described as enthusiasm. Crix faints again. Blomp makes a sound like a deflating whoopee cushion. Professor Vrex's jaw drops so far it creates a small sonic boom. The shadow maw reaches the chair leg, picks it up delicately in jaws that could crack a battleship hull. And this is the part that's going to give xenobiologists nightmares for decades. Trots back to Jake with what any human would immediately recognize as the universal expression of, "Again, again, do it again." "Good boy," Jake says, scratching behind what might be ears, might be sensory organs, or might be decorative death spikes. Nobody's quite sure anymore. "Who's a good apex predator? You are. Yes, you are." The creature that has terrorized the galaxy for millennia starts making a sound that's unmistakably purring. Purring like a freight train full of contented cats. "This is impossible," Professor Vrex whispers, his worldview crumbling in real time. The shadow maw is incapable of domestication, incapable of bonding, incapable of anything except systematic elimination of all life forms. Jake shrugs, still scratching behind the creature's probably ears while it leans into the contact like an oversized house cat. Yeah, well, you probably never tried asking nicely. Professor Vreck stares at the scene unfolding before him with the expression of someone watching their entire academic career get fed through a paper shredder. His carefully prepared lecture notes flutter forgotten to the floor as Jake continues to demonstrate that everything the galaxy knows about apex predators is apparently complete nonsense. Okay, class, Jake announces, settling cross-legged on the floor while the shadow maw flops down beside him like a two-toed lapdog. Since Professor Vreck seems to have temporarily lost the ability to form coherent sentences, let me explain what's actually happening here. The shadow maw rolls onto its back, exposing a belly covered in what looks like armored plating, but which Jake is now rubbing like it's the softest thing in the universe. The creature's massive legs kick slightly in the air, and that freight train purr gets even louder. First lesson, Jake continues, addressing his audience of traumatized aliens while providing belly rubs to a living weapon of mass destruction, is understanding pack dynamics. Earth predators, wolves, dogs, even big cats, they're social creatures. They need structure, they need leadership, they need to know where they fit in the hierarchy. Prix, who has regained consciousness for the second time today and is slowly peering over his desk like he's watching a horror movie through his fingers, whispers, "But the research says shadow maws are solitary hunters." "Shia," Jake agrees, scratching under what might be the creature's chin, causing it to make a sound like a happy industrial engine. Solitary, because they've never had a proper pack. Look at this guy. He's probably been alone his entire life. No social structure, no clear alpha to follow. No wonder he's been acting out. Professor Vrex finally finds his voice, though it comes out as a strangled croak. Acting out? Acting out? It destroyed the Kepler research station. Because nobody taught him the rules, Jake explains patiently, like he's discussing a poorly trained golden retriever that chewed up the couch. Earth had wolves too, remember? Apex predators, pack hunters, could absolutely wreck your day if they wanted to. But humans figured out something pretty important. If you establish yourself as the alpha, if you show consistent leadership and clear boundaries, they become the most loyal companions in the universe. The shadow maw has now rolled completely upside down, tongue lolling out in what can only be described as pure bliss. Its terrible claws, previously described as capable of shearing through titanium alloy, are now gently batting at Jake's hand like a playful kitten. The key, Jake continues his impromptu lecture, is confidence without aggression. You can't be afraid. They can sense fear from a mile away, and fear makes you unpredictable. You can't be aggressive either, because that's a challenge, and challenges lead to fights. You have to be calm, assertive, and consistent. Blomp, who has been vibrating at increasingly worried frequencies, manages to form words. But how did you know it would work? Jake grins, the kind of grin that suggests he's been waiting for someone to ask exactly that question. Body language mostly. When he first came out of that container, sure, he looked scary, but I've seen scared animals before, lots of them. The way he was moving, the way he was checking his surroundings, the hesitation before approaching, that's not predatory behavior. That's anxiety. He demonstrates by gently pushing the shadow maw's massive paw, and the creature playfully swats back with all the deadly precision of a sleepy house cat. Plus, Jake adds, the fetch thing was kind of obvious. Look at his build. Long legs, deep chest, that sleek profile. He's built for running and retrieving, probably evolved as a pursuit predator, which means his instincts are all about chasing and bringing things back to the pack. Professor Vrex, who has been scribbling notes frantically, stops writing and looks up with something approaching academic excitement overriding his existential crisis. You mean to suggest that the shadow maw's hunting methodology isn't systematic elimination, but rather pack coordination? Exactly, Jake says, brightening like a teacher whose student just grasped a difficult concept. He wasn't hunting those research stations. He was trying to bring them back to his pack, which unfortunately for everyone involved, didn't exist. So he probably got confused and frustrated when nobody came to collect his gifts. The shadow maw, as if understanding the conversation, sits up and places its massive head in Jake's lap, looking up at him with eyes that no longer seem terrifying but rather hopeful, like a dog waiting to be told it's done good. Who's been a good boy? Jake coos, scratching behind those probably ears again. Who's been trying so hard to be a good pack hunter with nobody to hunt for? Yes, you have, such a good boy. Prick slowly emerges from behind his desk. This is absolutely insane. This is Tuesday, Jake corrects again. On Earth, we call this dog training. Humans have been doing it for about 15,000 years. Works on pretty much anything with pack instincts and sufficient intelligence. Professor Vrex drops his notes entirely. 15,000 years? Your species has been systematically domesticating apex predators for 15 millennia? Ooh, way longer than that, Jake says casually while the galaxy's most feared killing machine nuzzles his hand like an oversized puppy. We've got archaeological evidence of human-wolf partnerships going back at least 30,000 years, possibly longer. Turns out, when you combine human intelligence with predator instincts, you get a pretty unstoppable team. The classroom falls silent except for the Shadow Maw's contented purring and the sound of several alien worldviews shattering simultaneously. 3 months later, Galactic University's campus newsletter features a front-page story with the headline, "Local Apex Predator Wins Intramural Frisbee Championship." The photo shows a very happy Shadow Maw, who now goes by Shadow because Jake thought his full name was too formal for a good boy, leaping 12 feet into the air to catch a disc while a crowd of alien students cheers from what they still consider a safe distance. Professor Vrex, who has spent the last several weeks having what can only be described as an extended academic nervous breakdown, has reluctantly added a new course to the xenobiology curriculum, human-animal psychology and practical domestication theory. The waiting list currently contains roughly half the university's student population and 3 department heads who just want to understand how this is possible. Shadow has become something of a campus celebrity. Every morning he can be found in the quad playing fetch with increasingly brave alien students who have discovered that the galaxy's most feared predator will literally roll over for belly rubs if you ask nicely. The campus security department has officially reclassified him from catastrophized biological hazard to good boy, very good boy indeed. Jake, meanwhile, has been unofficially promoted to assistant teaching fellow in applied death world survival strategies, a position that didn't exist until the university administration realized they had accidentally enrolled the galactic equivalent of a predator whisperer. His office hours are booked solid with students wanting to learn the mysterious human art of not dying horribly when faced with dangerous wildlife. The key, Jake explains to his latest group of fascinated and terrified students, while Shadow demonstrates his latest trick of playing dead on command, is understanding that most predators aren't actually trying to be evil. They are just trying to survive, find their place in the social order, and maybe get some scratches behind the ears. Prix, who has become Jake's most dedicated student and Shadow's second favorite human, raises a tentacle. But what about creatures that seem genuinely malevolent, purely destructive with no social instincts? Jake grins. Then you get creative. Ever heard of a honey badger? The class collectively shudders. They have by now all heard of honey badgers. The point is, Jake continues, humans didn't become the galaxy's accidental apex species because we're the strongest or the smartest or the most technologically advanced. We got here because we figured out something everybody else missed. Making friends with the monsters is way more effective than fighting them. Professor Vrex, who has been attending these impromptu lectures with the dedication of a graduate student cramming for finals, clears his throat. I must admit, he says, his academic pride warring with observable reality, that human domestication techniques appear to be surprisingly effective. Surprisingly effective? Jake laughs, giving Shadow a command that makes the former terror of the galaxy sit, shake hands with his massive paw, and then roll over twice. Professor, we turned wolves into chihuahuas. We convinced cats to live in our houses despite the fact that they're perfectly capable of surviving without us. We made friends with horses, trained eagles to hunt for us, and taught dolphins to work with our military. He pauses for effect, scratching Shadow behind the ears while the creature makes that industrial-strength purring sound. And now apparently we've added Shadow Maw, friendship coordinator, to the resume. The university's latest course catalog, published the following semester, includes several new offerings: Introduction to Stick-Throwing Theory, Advanced Belly Rub Techniques, and Interspecies Pack Dynamics for Beginners. All 3 courses have waiting lists longer than most space freight routes. Shadow, for his part, has adapted to academic life with remarkable enthusiasm. He's learned to sit quietly during lectures, only occasionally trying to fetch Professor Vrex's pointer when it gets waved around too enthusiastically. His favorite spot is the university library, where he serves as an unofficial therapy animal for stressed students during finals week. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, other apex predators are probably wondering why they never thought to just ask for belly rubs instead of conquering civilizations. Because in the end, it turns out the real monsters were the friends we made along the way. Or something like that. Jake's still working on the philosophy part. He's too busy teaching Shadow how to play frisbee.